So it's not from
Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you very much for coming to be here today to be a part of this very important conversation. I'm Leslie C. I'm with WCTR Radio here in Chestertown. And this is an idea that kind of came to fruition over a year ago. With a growing opioid addiction problem in the community, our community, I felt it important to sit down and talk about it. So I had this idea that we could have a forum on the radio that we could broadcast, maybe do a series that we could rebroadcast or podcast for people to come, important people in our community, to talk about this problem. And then the more I thought about it, I reached out to Kent County Behavioral Health. We had a back and forth conversation. I thought, wait a minute, this conversation is bigger than just these people sitting in front of you. This conversation is a whole community conversation. So I felt like it needed to happen in a place where the community could come and listen and join in. So thank you for being willing to come and listen and join in this conversation. I have a great panel of speakers up here in front of you. I want to introduce them to you and you to them. Tim Dubb, to my immediate left. He is the local addictions authority for Kent County. He and his staff work tirelessly in the community trying to educate on addiction and its effect, as well as provide the training for Naloxone, which I think he'll tell you about, and to organize people together to help combat this problem. To his left, Rachel Goss, and then Randy Gutting. They are community outreach specialists, and they are part of a group called the OIT, which I think they can explain to you a lot better than I can. But they connect the patient and the family, which, you know, when you think about opioid abuse, you have the patient, the person who is under the addiction, and you have the family, and they're part of the addiction as well. So this group connects the patient and their family to a peer recovery specialist who can help them get stable recovery and offer hope and access to resources. And the one most important part of what they do is to help remove the stigma. That's the problem, and that's the roadblock for the opioid addiction, and for any addiction, is there's a stigma that stands there like a giant wall that tries to squelch our conversation. And we're saying, you know what, no, we're gonna come out and we're gonna have this conversation, so that's why we're here. Now, Annette is over here. She's floating around the room. There she is. She is the prevention coordinator for Kent County. And this program provides services for youth, parents, and other citizens of Kent County. The staff collaborates with many other agencies and organizations to coordinate and implement projects and activities that address substance abuse, especially among youth. She's got some information over here that when we take our break, you'll be able to go over, pick up some pamphlets, get some more information, and talk with her if you have any questions. Also on the panel, you'll see we have Jen Moore. Jen is from the local management board. She started in the Delaware prison system. She worked for a private behavioral health company, and she kind of delved into clinical case management. So she is kind of at the grassroots of what happens once someone is convicted, once someone's been arrested who has an opioid addiction, and where that goes. She understands the effect on families. And again, you're going to see a common theme through everybody's conversation today. It's not just a one-person addiction. It's an addiction that touches the entire family. So she is going to represent the local management board, which coordinates a system of local services for Kent County for children, youth, and families. So that's very important. Ginger Gregg, you'll see on the very end, is with the Kent County Emergency Services offices. That's the coordinating agency for emergency response for day-to-day emergencies and natural and technological hazards. But she's on the front lines. The emergency services offices hears the calls and hears what's happening in our community. So she's on the pulse. She knows what the cause and effect are. So she's here to voice that side of it. We have also with us our mayor, Serena, who was recently reelected, and he's going to be our mayor until 2022. Talk about somebody who is out and about in the community. He sees the effect of everything on his community, good, bad, and indifferent. So he can see the law enforcement side, he sees the behavioral health side, he sees the effect on what happens in our community as far as not only the families, but what the businesses and the organizations in the community and how they are affected with what I like to call the ripple effect or the domino effect of addiction. And finally, we have with us our Chief Baker from the Chestertown Police Department. He's going to talk about the difference in how he does his job and how the community is affected because of the opioid crisis. And it really is a crisis in the community. So I thought the best way to start this and to get the conversation kind of started was to have a personal story of someone who's lived with and through and come out on the other side of addiction. So I want to introduce to you someone that I admire you and commend you for being brave enough to come in front of a group of people you don't maybe know, some you might, and tell your story. Now, what's really important about this woman is that she is the executive director of Foundations of Recovery. She's the owner of the Mission House here in town. She's been living free from drugs and alcohol since May of 2009. Absolutely. She continues to spread the message that regardless of what one's past looks like, there is always hope for a new future. So I want you to meet Chrissy Chisholm.
Hi. Thank you. This is exciting. You know, it says I'm only supposed to talk for 15 minutes about myself, so I'm going to try to keep it to like an hour if I can do that. I'm really here strictly by the grace of God and the support of my community. I'm not from here. I'm originally from New York. You'll be able to hear my accent the more nervous I get. But it really wouldn't be possible if I didn't have the support of a community, because this is a community disease. And my parents are here, which is really cool. I think the last time we were in a public place together and I was in the spotlight was probably courtroom when I was getting sentenced, which it's just poetic justice at this point. But I guess just like a little bit of my story. I grew up in Long Island. This upper middle class family, had everything I ever wanted, needed, hoped, dreamed. It wasn't this big struggle, but for some reason there was always this void that I was different, or that something, like I just didn't get the memo, like how people could just wake up and be excited to like go to school and do activities, and I'm like, that doesn't sound like fun to me. Like my dream was to be a groupie. I was gonna travel the world and follow all these musicians and just party all the time. And I tried really hard to do that, and I had a really good run, but I ended up in my first residential treatment at 15. I was big in the rave scene in New York. Got into a lot of trouble at school, got expelled, caused a lot of damage to my family, my friends. I wasn't the kid that got invited over to places. I was a mischievous little thing. But what happened was that rehab had planted seeds. I'm sorry, I'm usually not nervous. The rehab had planted seeds. I had no intention of staying sober at 15. I don't think anybody does. So the next 10 years of my life, it looked like jails and institutions and rehabs and lawyers and just hanging out with people that no good girl should be hanging out with. I was addicted to the lifestyle. I was addicted to obviously I was addicted to like the drugs and the alcohol, but it was this whole multifaceted idea of being against the grain that really attracted me to living dirty. And finally, after 10 years of ripping and running and countless bad experiences, I ended up back at Father Martin's for a second time. And they said to me, what are you going to do this time? What's different? And I was 23. And I said, I just don't want to do it anymore. I'm tired. I just don't want the consequences. Don't know if I want to be clean and sober, but I know I'm tired of doing damage. At the time I had a 4-year-old little girl who needed me. I was still in college, still functioning, like barely. I was living in my parents' basement. Forgot how to shower, forgot how to brush my teeth, but like still thinking that I had my shit together, But that's what this disease does. I have this disease that's in my head, and it's part of every fiber of my being that tells me that I don't have a disease, that I'm okay, you know, that nothing's wrong, just you're good, you're maintaining, you're vertical, you know, everything's fine. And this disease tries to kill me every day, and it takes everything that I love and everything that I want, you know, it takes it, and then it slowly kills me, this slow spiritual death, to where, you know, I got to a point where I just woke up wanting to die. You know, I remember my last time out, it was, I hadn't slept in like 4 days. I was hanging out with people that I shouldn't have been hanging out with, and I was in the car, and I was driving at 3 o'clock in the morning to go meet, you know, my medicine man so I didn't get sick, and I just remember it was pouring rain, very dramatic, you know, pouring rain, can't see the lines in the road. Had been on this like 3-day binge, and I remember knowing, like I closed my eyes for a second, and I said, you know, one of 3 things are gonna happen. I'm gonna crash this car and I'm gonna die. I'm gonna crash this car and I'm gonna hit somebody and I'm gonna go to prison for the rest of my life. Or I'm gonna crash and I'm gonna be okay and I'm gonna have to go to rehab again and I'm gonna get arrested again, and I'm just gonna be on this like sick roller coaster again. And I really wanted the first thing to happen. I just wanted to die. My family would be better off, my kid would be better off, everybody would be okay, because Chrissy's not there causing chaos and damage and insidiousness anymore. So the next thing I know, my airbags are out, and I got really excited, and I said, I'm gonna sue Acura because airbags can't just come out, you know, that's really dangerous, don't they know? I had no idea that I crashed, still have no idea what I hit. But, you know, I run my pockets and I pull my bottle out from under the seat, because at that point I had a real, like, alcohol. I was a real alcoholic, you know. If I wasn't drinking, I was shaking, I was going through DTs, I was physically dependent on alcohol. And, you know, the police came, and I'm like, 1 second, you know, let me finish, you know. They don't have a sense of humor at like 3 o'clock in the morning in the pouring rain, you know. So they ripped me out of the car, and I said, I'm not gonna take your tests. We all know what's going on here, you know, let's just go. They said, well, we have to take you to the hospital because you blew really high. I think it was like 0.28, something like that. And so they take me, and I'm chatting it up. Still have no idea that I'm in a lot of trouble. You know, this is my second DUI at that point. And so I call my lawyer, and I said, Scott, I got arrested again. He said, okay, well, you know the drill. And okay, so anyway, so I go to rehab again, and they say, what's different this time? You know, because you've been on this ride before. You know, what's going to change? And I said, I'm done. You know, like why don't you tell me what to do? You know, I still had a little bit of an attitude, but you know, clearly this is how I manage my life, and it turns into a shit show every single time. So you tell me what to do, and I'll just do it. And they said, okay, you need to go to a recovery house down in Delray Beach. I said, no way. You have no idea who I think I am. You know, I have a kid, I have a job, I'm going to school. And they said, no, you don't do any of those things. That's like this delusion, this land of Oz that you created. You just dropped out of school. Your kid hasn't seen you in weeks. You're busy running around getting arrested, not sleeping for days. What are you gonna do? I said, fine, I'll go. But I'm going to Delray. I'm not going to Pennsylvania. If I'm gonna get sober, it's gonna be at the beach. And I said, okay, go. So I go, you know, and my biggest concern at that time is that I'm 23 years old, and I have not had a sober breath since I was probably 14, 15 years old. So now you're telling me I can't drink, I can't do drugs, I can't hang around all these like cool people anymore. What the fuck am I supposed to do? You know, I don't want to get sober to be boring, because when I looked around the rooms at the fellowship, you know, 12-step programs, I saw that everybody was old and boring, and they were just like grumpy looking. And I said, no, I don't want to like get clean to not have fun. So I made it my mission to have fun in Florida and just know that recovery could be fun. And I did, you know, I made a lot of friends, and I spent all my money on tattoos and energy drinks and coffee, and did a whole lot of surfing, and little by slowly, you know, my life started to come together in ways that I had no idea that life could come together. You know, I found myself having fun going to the movies and playing mini golf and doing all these things that I thought were really lame, but had I not had the opportunity, I wouldn't have known, you don't know what you don't know until you experience it, So I stay sober. I end up coming back to New York, and now I have my kid, and I have a husband, and I have a life, and I'm like really getting into the work, all the work, because when you get clean, they tell you, okay, here's what you're gonna do. You're gonna turn your will and your life over to God. I don't care if you believe in Him or not. You're gonna change everything about yourself, and you're not allowed to talk to all the people who had your back when you were out there. And I was like, are you joking? No, that's what you're gonna do. And I said, okay. Because at that point I was desperate. I was desperate to do anything. You could have told me to stand in the corner on my head for like 45 minutes every day, and I would have done it. And little by slowly, my life started coming together. And I got custody of my kid back. I made real, genuine friends who didn't care what I had to offer or what I would do. They just really liked me because I still have no idea why, but they and that void that I was missing. I never thought that I had the capacity to be anything but selfish. I never thought I had the capacity to genuinely love people. I didn't think I had the capacity to be a member of society. And here I am doing it all, and I have no idea why, other than I made the decision not to pick up a drink or a drug, and I continue to walk one foot in front of the other. And I just haven't found it necessary, I haven't found it necessary to pick up a drug or a drink in the past 9 years. And I've been through some shit, like I've had friends die. I was tricked into moving down. Actually, no. Okay, so it was Hurricane Sandy. That was like the real reason we came down here. But my husband's like, no, it's just like Long Island. It's gonna be great. It's fine. It's like, this is nothing like Long Island. Pros and cons, but it's different. I love it now. I have 3 kids, and 2 of them have never seen me face down in the dog food. They've never seen the police take their mother away. They've never seen any of this, and I have this 14-year-old now who's the exact opposite of me, and I look at her sometimes, and I'm like, where did you come from? Why are you so good? And just the way that she carries herself, it's a true testimony to what recovery does for people. It doesn't just heal the person, like it started with me, and it caused this ripple effect. So through recovery, it's healed my family, it's healed my relationships, it's healed just everything. It's so powerful, and there is no rhyme or reason, and I wish I had the vernacular to really describe like what it does, but there's just some things that can't be put into words. It's just feelings, and I don't think there are words for it. But the thing with the recovery house, it came to be because a friend of mine and myself were talking over coffee one day, and I said, "What's up with Chestertown? Why is there no? There's like you have the Whitsitt Center, which is phenomenal. It's great, but then what do people do when they get home? Because there's nothing in place that connects. It's like getting dried out for 28 days. That's great." But this is a lifetime, this is a lifelong process. So what do people do when they get out? She said, well, they go to recovery houses in Annapolis. And I said, well, why isn't there one here? And she said, because nobody opened one. So well, somebody needs to open one, and everybody's looking at me, and I'm looking behind my shoulder, like there's got to be a more qualified adult to do this, But it didn't happen that way, I had the time, and I had the passion, and I had the enthusiasm, and everything just fell into place, and this recovery house has been, it's been my saving grace in more ways than one. These women, they come in and they just have no hope, and the way that they support each other and they encourage each other and they love each other, it's the first connections that they make, and to watch it from the opposite side, I have goosebumps. To watch it from the opposite side, it's like watching God come down and just bless people, because it's, I did the footwork, I put it together, but I have no control over what happens when they walk through those doors, and to see these girls come in and they have nothing, and they're just sick, and they're just frantic, like looking for a solution, and the way that the community bonds together and accepts them and loves them and offers them jobs and rides and food, and it heals them, and it causes that ripple effect. It heals them, and then they heal their families, and then it just balloons outward. So it's been like 15 minutes. I feel like I've been talking forever. Am I good? I am. I'm nothing short of blessed to be given the opportunity to be here today, to be standing here today. I have such like this big vision for what Chestertown in general can be as far as recovery, because we see this epidemic, and I'm so tired. I'm tired of watching people die. I'm tired of going to funerals. I'm tired of watching kids saying where's my mom? Why can't she come home yet? It's insidious, man. And if I can be part of the solution in any way, even if it's just for like a month, that I help these women, I will continue. I'll continue to show up and suit up and put my big girl panties on and one foot in front of the other, just trying to share the message. That's all I got. Thanks.
So now we start the conversation, because this is where we make the difference. This is a problem in our community, and it's a two-faced problem. It is a problem of heroin and opioids that are available readily, easily, inexpensively to people who have a void in their life that they want to fill. It's also a problem of prescription drug abuse, of someone who has a simple injury, who gets prescribed an opioid to manage their pain. And today it only takes one, and tomorrow it takes three, and the day after it takes seven, and suddenly you're spending $700 a month on a prescription to manage pain, and suddenly you find out you can buy it someplace else a lot cheaper. So it's a ripple effect problem. It ruins families, it ruins people's lives, and I want us to be able to talk about it, share the conversation from all sides. As you can see, this panel of people, they're all on the front line, but from a different space with a different vision. And so I want them to all be in the same room with you, offer their view, their knowledge, their experiences, and I want you to become a part of that conversation. So Tim is going to start the conversation off. Tim and Rachel and Randy are going to talk about addiction, they're going to talk about recovery, and they're going to talk about prevention. And from that, we'll move on to what effects our community is feeling because of this growing crisis. As I said earlier, and I've said to several people, we have a sign at the intersection of Washington Avenue and Morgneck Road that tells us, it's a countdown, if you will, of every overdose they have and every death. I want us to be able to look at that sign and it always be zeros, from the day 1 of a year to the day 31 of the last month of the year. That's our goal. And if we open this conversation, we just might get there. So Tim Dove, you can take over now for me. They're going to start the conversation, and at the end, then if you have any questions, I invite you to join in the conversation. So when they're all done, just raise your hand, and at any time, if you have a question, raise your hand, and Brian will jump around with a microphone, and you can ask the questions. That's Brian over in the corner. So all right, Tim, it's all yours.
Well, good afternoon. Thank you so much for having us here today. I want to thank you so much for sharing your story. That was just powerful and yet intimate. You stated one word that resonated with me, and that was insidious. And this is insidious. It has impacted so many families on such a deep level. And not only the individual that is suffering from the disease, but the families. And I think that there's a tendency for us to forget about the families. When we're dealing with overdoses, there's a tendency sometimes for us to overlook the impact the trauma that's attributed to families that are going through this process. And I think about, when you think about the families that are going through overdose experiences, every overdose that occurs, non-fatal, and I'll get into the fatal overdoses in a second, but non-fatal overdoses, just here in Kent County, every one that occurs, think about the families that are experiencing these, whether it's a significant other, a grandmother, grandfather, a child. They have to, when the individual is resuscitated, take it to the emergency room if they choose, or if EMS shows up and resuscitates and they refuse treatment. The family experiences such a significant trauma watching someone they love, a near-death experience, being brought back. And that's not something that you can just get a mind eraser and take away. They have to live through that trauma, lay their head down and try to go to sleep. Lay their head down and try to go to sleep. It's hard to get past that experience. The next day they have to get up and go about life as if that didn't occur. I think about the children that have to go to school the next day, have to put the backpack on and go to school. And, okay, concentrate, do well in school, and yet we have behavioral problems in school. We have kids that aren't doing well in school. We have the significant other that has to go to work the next day to make ends meet. There is so much collateral damage in our communities that we're unaware of. And that is a piece of the puzzle that we here, as a part of the opioid intervention team, that Rainey Gutting, Rachel Goss, and I, and Rainey and Rachel are peer recovery specialists. And what we're doing through these overdose responses is that we are going directly in through the emergency room. We are connecting directly with families. We're going into the communities, into the homes when we are given permission. We are contacting families. We're making sure that in the event that the individual does not want treatment, we're trying our very best to make sure that the families that are suffering know that they're not alone. I think that's so important because that is a lost piece. Families need to know that they are not a forgotten entity in this process because families don't have answers. And so they need to know that we as a community have answers for them because they've got endless questions. So we're doing our very best to try to piece together those fragmented pieces of a puzzle. It's as if somebody, if you would, take their lives as a picture of a puzzle, and every time an overdose happens, that picture is thrown to the wind, and the pieces are scattered, and they don't know how to put it back together, so we need to help them as a community to do that. Now, we have yet to get the full stats for 2017 as far as overdose deaths, and I'm waiting for that to come out. But I want to give you an idea. We did, through our opioid intervention team and through the local Drug and Alcohol Council, we went throughout the community and we provided some education about opioids and through the opioid epidemic. And I share these stats every time I went. So if some of you were there and you heard this, I apologize in advance, but there are a lot of people that weren't there. So I want to share this. In 2016 in the state of Maryland, there were a total of 2,089 overdose deaths in the state of Maryland. That's overwhelming. But yet you don't hear about that. But I want to give you this number to kind of give you something that you can kind of sink your teeth into. A 747 jet houses about 416 passengers. Now, if a 747 jet were to crash and lose all of its passengers, that would make every major news outlet in the state of Maryland. Now, imagine in 2016 there were 5 that crashed and we lost every passenger. That is devastating. Now, that's how many people die from overdose. in 2016, but yet there was not even a blip on the map. The reason you don't hear about it is because of stigma that's attached to substance abuse. We have to work harder to remove the stigma. We have to. That's somebody's child, that's somebody's mom, dad, somebody's grandchild. There's a hole in somebody's life as a result of the death. And the opioid epidemic is significant now. And the reason why people are dying at such a significant rate is because of, it's just not because of heroin anymore. It's because of fentanyl. And what people aren't aware of is fentanyl is about 100 times more potent than morphine. And there's an intentionality that people aren't aware of, is that it's being intentionally added to, if you would, to the heroin to maximize, if you would, the euphoria, to the high. Because as people use a substance, they develop a tolerance which decreases the effect. That's a natural aspect of addiction. The longer a person uses a substance, the more their tolerance naturally increases, which diminishes the effect. And the longer they use something, the more their tolerance increases, the more they become physically dependent to it. So if they were to discontinue or to try to attempt to discontinue or cut off their use, to get into what we call a physical withdrawal. And that's why when you hear people saying, well, you know, why don't you stop? Because they get sick. The drug now becomes a medicine, whether it's alcohol, whether it's heroin, whether it's prescription medications. So it's not that easy sometimes just to stop. People think it's a matter of will. Well, it's not that easy, and people didn't grow up and say, you know, when they were in third grade, when they were saying, what are you going to be when you grow up? Well, I'm going to be a doctor. How about you? I'm going to be a lawyer. Well, I'm going to be a drug addict. That's not the way it works. Nobody willingly wants to become a drug-addicted person. It just happens. And again, sometimes people get addicted as a result of an injury, and some people become addicted as a result of the fact that out of experimentation. And then we can't overlook the fact of a genetic component. Some people are genetically predisposed to become addicted. I'm sure if we were to take a look at our own family history, and if you were to look back, there are people in your family that we don't talk about that have used substances and have had problems. It's just not a disease that people talk about socially. We have moved light years forward as far as the conversation is concerned. It used to be that mental health had the stigma that nobody wanted to talk about that, and now we've moved forward with that. But addictions is still further behind in that process. It's amazing. Opioids used to be or heroin used to be the dirty drug until it hit the middle class. And all of a sudden now there is this bright light that shines on it. Before that it was an inner city drug, and now since it's hit middle class, now the light is shining on it. It's always been an issue. It was just primarily stuck into the cities. Baltimore was always the heroin capital, if you would, but now it is in middle America. And it is rampant throughout the entire United States. Who would have ever thought that Maine and New Hampshire would be hit so hard? But it is. And people are dying left and right. In Kent County, I want to make sure you understand what we are doing to try to offset the epidemic. We are desperately trying to train as many people as we can in Narcan. What is Narcan, or Naloxone? It is the same medication that the EMS uses in the event of an opioid overdose. It is in a nasal form. Used to be when EMS would show up, they would have to use it in an injectable form, okay? But now people are using it in a nasal form. When they used to use it in an injectable form, people would come out of their opioid high in a kind of violent way, because what it did, it was instantly knocked the opioid off the opioid receptor, and it would immediately throw them into withdrawal. That's not a fun time. But whereas in the nasal injectable form, people kind of wake up very slowly and in a less violent and very, actually in a pretty normal fashion. We train as many people as we can. In fact, we have saturated the county. The AF Whitsett Center, I believe Andrew Pons is here today, the director of the AF Whitsett Center, and they have done an incredible job of giving the medication out and training all the patients that are leaving, ensuring that they have that on hand. And they're also training families as they come through on visitation, ensuring that they have that as well. So we're ensuring that we get that in the hands of everybody that wants it, because we recognize it's just not the person that's using heroin, it's the families need to have it. We've also ensured that the hospital has Narcan on hand in the emergency rooms. So when people are overdosing, the family members are being trained and they have that on hand. So we're doing what we can to ensure that everybody has access. And also understand this, let me make sure I say this clear for everybody. There is a stigma that's attached to this, just people that are using heroin that need Narcan. That is absolutely false. What about the elderly that are using narcotics? Sometimes they may forget that they've taken that medication. And if you're taking care of an elderly person, you need to have that on hand, because if they take more of a narcotic and they accidentally overdose, you need to have that medication in your home. If you have a toddler in the house and there's narcotics in the house and somebody were to drop that medication, you need to have that medication in your house. So literally, I believe everybody needs to have Narcan wherever you go. You never know when you may come into a situation, maybe you pull into the McDonald's parking lot and you see somebody that's sitting there in an overdose situation, and it's you and them, and you're waiting for EMS to show up. You could be the very one to save a life. So that's how important this is for us. So that's what we're doing. We're doing everything we can to ensure that everybody is armed to fight the epidemic. Because you never know when you may be that very one to be the one standing in the gap. And there's nothing more empowering, I believe, to be prepared to save a life. And for us, I think, and as a community, to lift the veil on the stigma that's attached to addiction is an incredible thing, and recognizing the fact that recovery is an attainable goal. I think that as a society, we have painted the picture that people can't get well. And they can, and they do. There are so many people in Kent County that have long-term quality recovery. If you were to line people up against the wall that are in recovery, you would never know it. I mean, these folks in recovery that are doing well are absolutely, the quality of the recovery is so incredible, you wouldn't know that. We have people in recovery, and the people that are in active addiction, you wouldn't know that they're doctors, they're lawyers, they're nurses, they're social workers. You wouldn't know it because they're functional. That's the face of addiction, and that's the face of recovery. It's hard to tell. So with that, I want to swing this over to these two wonderful young ladies who have dedicated their lives to helping others. And then now we are partnering together to fight this epidemic. So I'll let the two of you kind of talk about what you're going to be doing with this process, if you would.
Thank you, Tim. Yes, go ahead.
Is it okay to ask a question?
Oh, please, help yourself.
Very good. Couple questions. First of all, you mentioned this, the Narcan is being, you want it in every hand that you can possibly get it in.
Absolutely.
What is your process of distribution? And I have a follow-up on that as well.
Okay, our process of distribution is very easy. Our office can be contacted, and it doesn't make a difference where you're from in Kent County, what agency you're from, whether it be faith-based, a private, nonprofit, a business. Our goal is no matter who you are, where you're at, if you contact us, we will train you. The medication is free. and we will make sure that it is in your hands. We will train anyone at any time.
Now, a follow-up to that, let's say, for example, I, as a private citizen, decide that I want to have Narcan with me in my home, my car, wherever. And I do find someone who seems to have need for this Narcan, and I administer to them. Am I protected under any good SAM laws? And also, when could I be causing adverse reactions to someone who I misdiagnosed?
No, that's a great question. You are covered under the Good Samaritan law. That is a great question. You are covered under the Good Samaritan law. You're acting in good faith. And there,
Even though we've been trained.
you were trained and you're covered, and there are no adverse reactions as a result of the Narcan. It causes no harm. But here is another good point. It only brings people out of an opioid overdose. It doesn't work for alcohol. It doesn't work for benzodiazepines such as, say, Xanax or Valium or anything like that. So if they are in a coma secondary to any other substance, it will not work, but it will work for all narcotics such as prescription pain medications, heroin, fentanyl. But here is the key issue when it comes to fentanyl. As a result of fentanyl, because of the strength of that drug, we're finding that people are having to give more than one dose. And that's why it's imperative in those instances, because an opioid is what we call a central nervous system depressant. It suppresses, it tells the brain basically stop breathing, okay? So in that instance, when you're recognizing that somebody is in an opioid overdose, a telltale sign, for instance, and I'm not trying to get into a training because it could take a while, but a telltale sign for anybody in this room to determine whether somebody is in an opioid overdose is the eyes. Opioids cause, when a person's under the influence of an opioid, their pupils are pinpoint, okay? Respirations are significantly suppressed to the point that maybe they're having 3, maybe 4 respirations in a minute. And as they become deeper in that coma, secondary to the opioid, they're even more suppressed. Blood pressure is dropped. Skin color changes. For Caucasians, they become lips are purple. The skin becomes very pale and so forth. And so, but people of color, for instance, African American, Hispanic, they then become more ashy, if you would. So we're going to see those things because what's happening as a result of the lack of oxygen, you're going to see those things occur. So, but the pinpoint pupil is a telltale sign. They're non-responsive. So there are things that you need to look for, but in the event of fentanyl, you're going to have to give more than one dose, and that's why it's so imperative to dial 911 first. So that's why they need to get on scene. So the first dose will only bring them out temporarily, and then they're going to have to give more than one dose, more than one dose, more than one dose. Sometimes they're having to give up to 3, 4, maybe 5, until they get to the hospital and they're hooked up intravenously to the medication. All right? So, yes, ma'am.
This may be coming up, but when you see somebody who's overdosing on an opioid and you give them that Narcan, how do you get them into their recovery? I mean, because you're only there for the first 5 minutes, you call 911. Is there recovery possible, or do you see a lot of repetition? And if you do get them into recovery, the success rate of those who have gotten the Narcan and gotten back on the heroin because it's physically addicted, or whatever opioid, I mean, how do you, no, I don't know what's going on.
Well, in those instances, if we're contacted, typically speaking, those instances, if they make it to the hospital, they have to first be willing to be able to ask for help. We can't force ourselves on anyone. If they wish to have inpatient treatment, if they desire inpatient treatment, the emergency room will contact the AF Whitsett Center. And if the AF Whitsett Center has bed availability at that time, they'll admit immediately into their facility for detox, and from that standpoint, if they wish, then they'll even extend care as long as needed and move them into recovery housing for extended care, or push them, if they wish, them back into the community, and then tie them into an existing behavioral health care program within the county. And we're fortunate in Kent County, we have 3 providers, and all 3 are dual license programs that offer mental health and substance abuse services, 2 of which provide what we call Vivitrol. And Vivitrol is what we call an opioid antagonist. And the beauty about Vivitrol is this: Vivitrol blocks the receptor site's ability to be able to allow opioids from even interacting in the brain. Okay, so you could use any opioid you want, and you can't have the euphoria. So it actually prevents any overdose or any effect. So it is an absolute, it's the best science as we speak as far as medication. It's like having Narcan on board all the time. And it's an injectable form. You get it once a month. And in conjunction with therapy, it is a beautiful way. It does for the patient behaviorally what they can't do. It does biologically for them what they can't do behaviorally. So it's a forced abstinence, if you would, while they're able to work on all the other aspects of their life. So in conjunction, if they have mental health issues, the medication works, so the brain has a chance to heal.
Do you see a lot of people who've gone through an opioid overdose asking for that, or?
You have, now, they have to be very motivated, you know. I'll let you know that through,
In general, just asking for.
we have a Vivitrol program through our detention center. We're fortunate in the fact that, and in fact, Dr. Ben Cole was here from the Eastern Shore Psychological Services. His program is providing jail-based services for us at the Kent County Detention Center. We have a Vivitrol program that we're providing inmates as they leave if they're opioid dependent. And in conjunction with the program that Dr. Ben Cole is utilizing in that system, it's a beautiful segue that they get the Vivitrol shot and then they segue directly into his program. So it's a beautiful dovetailed effect. So they get the shot. They got a 30-day window that they can't use any opioids. They roll right into his program. They already have a therapeutic relationship with those counselors there, and right in, and then they get their next shot, and then their next shot, and all their needs are met. So it is a beautiful program the way that's set up. So there are programs in place that can meet all of our residents' needs. It's just, are they motivated to connect and stay connected? And that's the rub.
Can I answer a little bit to your question as well? I'm from Emergency Services, and we are sort of a 3-part department. We have the 911 center, and we have the paramedic response. And what Tim has said is absolutely, positively true. There is a really great system in place. If 911 gets a call and the paramedics respond and it is an overdose situation, they'll administer Narcan. And the next step is to transport to the hospital, and then the hospital refers the patient to Tim and the company over there. And that's the ideal way that it happens. Not everyone who is revived through Narcan is willing to be transported. The paramedics are doing their best to encourage everyone to be transported to the hospital for evaluation and then move into treatment, but not everyone is ready at the same time. The motivation is the key, and what those paramedics do is they leave information with a person. If they opt not to be transported, they will leave information for them with phone numbers so that they can get treatment when they're ready. But the motivation is the key. They must be ready. And if they are not, then you do risk a second event or a third event.
And one solution that we've developed to address that, the sheriff realized it was occurring elsewhere in the state, and we now do it to police, If someone is desperate enough to overdose, basically risking their lives, then we feel it's appropriate to issue an emergency petition. And so when the police are on the scene, that's what they're doing. Whether they want to go or not, they're going to go. And that gets them into the system. So that's been a gap that I think has been very effective.
Statistics statewide for 2016. I know earlier this year I tried to do a story about 2017 for Kent County, and I was unable to get the numbers. I'm going by the signs that are out there in Millington, Rock Hall, and Chestertown, which we're being told are the number of reported overdoses. Then when I talked to you, Tim, about a week ago, you said, well, that's not all of them. So if our objective, as the keynote speaker said, is eventually we want those signs to say 0, I think it would be helpful if we could get a better number of exactly what we're talking about. It's great to throw out the word epidemic, but for Kent County, what does that mean? So do we have any hard data?
Well, understanding this is that those may be, the stats are hard to correlate because some of those stats sometimes are coming from the sheriff's department, others are coming from EMS and so forth. So what stats I look at are directly being transported to the hospital. Okay, and some of that information also, understanding is that when we look at that information, some of that is not always differentiated as far as drug information either, because some of the testing is not always able to break down exactly what the cause was, because most of, say for instance, in facilities, when we send a drug test out, we're able to actually break down what the drug actually was, right down to the finite metabolite, if you would. The hospital doesn't have that capacity because they're doing it right in-house. And so what they're trying to do there is they're trying to find out what was it positive for, was it an opioid or what have you. But when we're able to do so, we're able to break it down. Was it heroin? Was it fentanyl? Was it, what type of opioid really was it? So, but what I'm looking at is that who was transported and was it an overdose? And so I'm not sure that we're always on the same page all the time. And I think from your standpoint, we just need to make sure that our numbers are correct.
Well, that's what I'm asking, that I can understand. I think those signs are updated once a month, and I know where the police are getting their information from, and I know that you get them from literally the people that are on the front line, the EMS people
Right.
that are providing.
So it's a matter of us just getting together and making sure
Well,
it's
that's what
stats.
I'm asking, so that the public, and I consider myself a public, every time I stop at the four-way sign there at Walgreens, I think the first thing I do is look over at the sign to see if that we've had a change.
Right.
So if we're going to put out those numbers, I would hope that we could be a little, I don't know, just have a better idea. And if in your case it takes some while for the testing to come back to find out, like you said, which particular drug it was, maybe give a report every 3 months, every 4 months, every 6 months. But me, just being a layperson, I'm saying to myself, well, the sign said we had 1 death by overdose this last year, which is better than the 5 the year before, and we had 18 overdoses, which is less than the year before. But I'm probably fooling myself because you're telling me, your exact words to me were, oh, we had more than that. Well,
Right.
I want to know, I want more to be quantified so that I really know what we're talking about.
Real stats are.
Yeah.
Okay, and I understand that completely.
The other complication is if somebody from Chestertown ODs over in Centerville, that's showing up in Queen Anne's County stats. And so there's some
Right.
lag time for, okay.
But and again, as far as overdose deaths in Kent County, you're right, that we need to be able to make sure that our numbers are correct so that citizens have an idea of what's happening here locally.
Part of removing the stigma. If we cannot talk openly about the numbers we have for whatever reasons, then we're never going to be able to move forward.
We need to compare apples to apples. I agree with you.
I probably don't need the microphone. I scare people even if I talk normally. And I'm reluctant to comment or ask questions because I'll take most of the people in this room way into uncomfort zone. But I want to say thank you to all of you. I can't stay for the whole meeting. And while we were talking about statistics and numbers and what's real and what's not, several people probably overdosed.
Right.
And you know, to me, talking statistics is like saying how many murders were there in Mexico last year? You know, check the numbers. Like I said, I don't want to take people too far into the gray area and out of your comfort zones. I'm in my comfort zone in this room. I don't know if the rest of you are. And I'm really glad that you advertise an open discussion about this. I would like to suggest that you leave the statistics out and get back to the meat and potatoes. Yeah, let's call it.
Well,
Yeah.
and I think that's perfectly fine.
Can I ask one more? I don't know if this is a question or not, but you see, back in the old days, in our epidemic, back in the 50s and 60s, before we called it an epidemic, before we called it fancy names like addiction and stuff, people had good habits and bad habits. And lives can be saved in emergency situations in ways that nobody ever imagined possible. And the statistics aren't going to turn up about those. And if anybody ever wants to talk to me, you're free to look me up. I'm an open book.
Well,
Thank you.
And if I could respond to that, or if you got, would you ladies like to respond to that?
I just wanted to say that I think that Narcan is really taken for granted because all of these overdoses really would be deaths because Narcan is relatively new. And I mean, it's saving these lives that would normally, I mean, not very long ago, would be deaths. So, I mean, we just had, 6 overdoses in a week last week, and they were all fentanyl related, or we suspect, because each person had to be revived more than once. And those would have been deaths if Narcan hadn't been
Just as a
administered.
point of information, if I could ask, how does one actually get to where you can carry Narcan? Is there a special certification that you need, or just make a phone call? Okay.
Make a call to us and we'll train you.
Heroin dealer and get Narcan so that you lose less customers. I'm sorry.
You can also walk into a drugstore. If you have been trained and you have used your Narcan, you can go into the drugstore and you can get it without a prescription. The national viewpoint is they want to get as much Narcan out there into the hands of citizens as they can possibly get. If you have insurance, your insurance will probably pick it up. Different plans offer different reimbursement rates, so I can't really speak to that. But the goal is to get Narcan out into the hands of as many people as they can possibly get it out to.
Some
Thank
of
you.
your concerns, sir, regarding liability and that sort of stuff. I had those same questions as chief of police and the liability of my officers. And so I didn't initially have them train in the use of Narcan. And really my mindset was in the town proper, and we're fortunate, our EMS is so quick to respond that they probably aren't going to get there any quicker than the police. That's not always the case. But anyway, as the epidemic continued, I had second thoughts to some degree with convincing from Tim and serving on the panel that we do to try and better address the problem. We did have our officers trained, and it really was very easy, half hour or whatever. And within the week after we were trained, in a 4-day period, my officers administered it 3 times. And they were all 3 saves. And it was all the same officer, by the way.
I think that answers the question of, talking about hard numbers, when you want to know if it's an epidemic, having 6 overdoses in 1 week, having your officers having to administer Narcan 4 times in 1 week, that's an epidemic. More than one, to me, is an epidemic, and it's something that's growing, and I think that's why we all feel it important to be here.
Well, and I should also be candid and say I had a selfish motivation, and that was I was concerned about incidental exposure by my officers. And you read about it. Unfortunately, I'm not aware of anything extremely local, but you hear about police and first responders who get it on their skin or inhale it inadvertently, and then they become affected. So it's for their own safety as well.
I think if we, Chris.
I think one of the things that makes this particular epidemic so unique and different is that a lot of these opioids you can get from a doctor prescribed to you for legitimate reasons, and then things go wrong or you get addicted through that way. So in a way, I mean, it's, you're never going to go to a doctor and get prescribed, cocaine, for example, but you might get prescribed Percocet. So I had a knee surgery, and that was a lot of discomfort. And I get it. Like, when I took that stuff, the pain went away, and you feel pretty damn good for about an hour and a half. And, I'm lucky that I don't have a physical or a mental sort of bent towards addiction. So when my situation got better, I just stopped taking the drugs. But I think that's what makes it so challenging for, like, an elected official like me, is that people can obtain this stuff through very legal means. And so the question is, what can we do when the situation gets out of hand? So I'm lucky that our chief has been very proactive in training our officers, and it's already been paying dividends. I would also say, the ramifications of when people are addicted, I think one way that it manifests itself in a place like Chestertown is through crime. My first term, there were at least 2 occasions where we had these crime sprees where for a 2, 3, 4 week period, people's cars were getting broken into, people's homes are getting broken into, and the thefts were really odd in that someone would come into a home with gold on the wall and they would steal a $10 bill. And it was almost every time it comes back to this person needs money, like right now, to get the fix, and it almost always ties back to drug use. So I think just from a boots on the ground, how do we see that as elected officials? We see it in our crime rate, and we see it in terms of how our police are responding to a lot of these calls. But I will say it's very tricky. Being a small town, we have a correspondingly small budget. So one of the reasons I wanted to come to this is so I can help educate myself about what other resources are out there, because the town doesn't have $100,000 a year to throw at this problem. But we can be more proactive about funneling people to the right channels that are already out there. So it's really nice that this group is here today to address some of that.
And if I may, you open the door for me with regard to the crime. And you will not find any more compassionate people than first responders, certainly including the police. And we see the worst of it. We see people when they are heavily addicted and desperate, and they kick us and they spit on us and they cuss at us, and we still help them. But that being said, there are victims beyond families and those who are addicted, and that is the public. Chestertown has a wonderful reputation of being this pristine and great place where everything is wonderful, and it can be taken advantage of. A lot of people think it's a place where I don't have to lock my house, and it's a place where I can keep my car unlocked, and if someone needs something, I'll help them, and I'll invite them into my home. And that spree that you mentioned, a result really of probably 3 or 4 people, was devastating to the community, where people would be asleep and hear a noise and realize that while they were in bed, someone was in their kitchen rattling around, taking their purse or their grandmother's wedding ring and selling it for $10. So people are very desperate, and there is a crime element that affects us all. So there's a lot of different sides to this problem, and that's one of them that, as a responsibility to protect the community, that I have to also address.
But I want to reiterate that our police are trained in Narcan and they do carry it with them, because I think if you're hanging out and your buddy's overdosing, your first reaction probably isn't to call the police. So, but I want to let it known that that's an option if, if you need someone to show up. And, what the great thing about Chestertown is you can pretty much drive across town in 5 to 10 minutes most times of day. So we could be there really quickly with people that are willing to help.
Back?
Yes, with regard to carfentanil and its danger, specifically incidental contact, have we addressed the potential risk as a use with weapons of mass destruction?
I'm going to have to not quite follow you. Could you clarify what you're saying? I
Well,
got the first part, but I didn't get the tie to weapons of mass destruction.
Well, incidental contact with these substances could be potentially fatal for any number of citizens. I just want to make sure that we're aware that the potential for any kind of danger in our community is there. And that's, I believe, one of the benefits of this forum. We need to communicate.
Oh, absolutely. It's definitely a danger. And again, we are aware of it. We have to assume that just about anybody we respond to may be in possession of such agents, and we have to take the precautions.
I just thinking to myself, I try to think about 3 months ago, maybe 3 to 4 months ago, there was an arrest in New York City. And some of you may have been aware of this, but there was an arrest in New York City where they confiscated, I think, about 194 to 196 pounds of fentanyl. And that is enough fentanyl, I believe the article said there was enough fentanyl to kill between, I think, 32 and 34 million people. Now it's hard for you to wrap around your head how many people that is, okay? But that's almost enough to kill the entire population of the state of California. Now, think on that for just a second. That's just about 192 to 194 pounds of fentanyl. So to answer that question, it has that capacity. So it is an absolute monster. Now, when you talk about carfentanil, for those of you that aren't familiar with what carfentanil is 10,000 times more potent than morphine. And
I do believe we need to mobilize the power of a world war to fight this.
it is an absolute incredible drug that they're now utilizing to kind of cut sometimes in with the heroin. Carfentanil is used as an animal tranquilizer. So they're moving this stuff in, and again, and I think it's important to understand there's an intentionality behind this. You got to understand that the drug business is the biggest business in the world. People think it's Apple. It's not Apple. It's not oil. It's probably drugs. Maybe oil. Okay. Okay. Drugs, oil probably. Petroleum. But the end result is drugs right on up there, and they've been doing a wonderful job with drugs for a long, long time. And it's infiltrated more government, stop, they'll probably come after me after this is done. But the end result is that you don't mess with the drug business. And so what they do is that if you take a very close look at what happened as far as the opioid addiction, it started off with prescription medications. They tested the market. It started on the East Coast with prescription medications. And once they tested that and got things going, pill mills jumped up everywhere. And so they got everybody addicted pretty much on prescription medications, and then they moved that aside, and then they brought the heroin in. And now that they've got that going, then they brought in the fentanyl. And then they're dabbling a little bit in with the carfentanil. So again, it's big business. And yes, ma'am.
I do believe, no, I don't do that. I do believe that percentages and statistics are very important because we need not delude people into thinking that bringing this to the awareness is going to be the cure and the end-all be-all, because that is not the case. It used to be years ago that things were transported in here because we are such a small community. But anymore, you can go right on the internet and they can teach you how to make things. And it starts at a young age, because anybody you talk to in recovery, they're going to tell you they started as a preteen or a teenager and how it has just progressed over the years. But statistically, what is the percentage rate of the people who remain in recovery, who do not, or repeat what we call retreads over and over and over again, that we're not thinking that you're going to get this up your nose and life's going to be wonderful and everything's going to go back to normal, because that is not the case. It may take years, it may take decades. Only from experience do I know that I can share this, that it affects the whole family. It affects all, as the young lady gave testimony to. But I believe the percentage rates of people staying in recovery and long-term recovery and the willingness that comes along with getting in recovery needs to be first and foremost, because we can patch people up, we can revive them, we can bring them back over and over and over again, but until the willingness is there, the problem still remains.
Has anybody got their phone on them that they can use their calculator? Do a quick math for me. 365 times 20. 7,300 days is the average day that most of our clients have been in their active addiction. That's 20 years. I usually start that with, hey, do you have a 20-year plan with your job? And it ends up being that I can turn that around and tell you that most of our clients who have been in active addiction, with some breaks in between, and I don't really call them getting clean, they've been not using for a few days or a few months. When you take the 7,300 days, which is a 20-year addiction, which the young lady who, she started using at 15, and at 25 she started the recovery process seriously. That's already 10 years of her life. So by 35 she already had a 20-year addiction should she had still been using. And 28 days is the amount of treatment that we approve. Mm-hmm. It makes no sense.
Exactly.
What are your percentages of people who are going to stay? Is that 2%?
I'm not in that I could, Wetsit Center could talk more about that. What I'd like to emphasize on is Tim's treatment, Andrew's treatment, any treatment program. If you go through the process, the education that you get is inevitably successful if you walk out with new information. From the day that you walk out is a different kind of success rate, not the treatment success rate, but the person's individual plan. And one of the biggest things that gets lost in some of the translation is the reentry process. You can't send somebody out of a jail and expect them to go do what they're supposed to do the first 24 hours. I can tell you from experience that one of the biggest things that's happening, the 24, 48, maybe the whole month before they get out of jail, is relapse triggers. They're relapsing before they walk out of the jail. And then we send them home with $35 and a ride from somebody that they're going to go get high with in 5 minutes and wonder why they end up back in treatment in 4 days. The centralized case management, the reentry process, the ability for somebody to have Narcan from an officer or EMS, if they were to go through the process and work with the Wetsit Center, Tim, one of our recovery aides, they have a much better chance of sustaining some long-term recovery options for every day that they stay clean. One of the comments for treatment is if we can get their butts in the seats for 90 days, we have a much greater chance of success as if they're in and out and they never show up. Some people don't do well in support group meetings because it's a constant reminder and conversation. It's a trigger. We talk about 7,300 days of active using. The short-term plans that we have for people right now are not what's necessary. The long-term inserting ourselves long-term in their lives. The average case management plans for the career criminal or the long-term person in long-term addiction, if you're not with them for 2 or 3 years, you're not going to see much of an impact. They need the support of mission houses. They need the support of halfway houses that they can go to, or people who are either in recovery or committed to the process. I'm not in recovery, so I have a different experience than walking into the house with my colleagues who had that experience. It doesn't change the impact of the work that we do. And I wrote down a word that I forget to bring up when I do this. Unconditional positive regard. I read something on Facebook today that somebody wrote that was a very insulting way to address someone who was getting help. And the place just blew up on him on Facebook. How could you be so mean? How could you be so lack of interest in somebody else's success? And unconditional positive regard means that we're in this system. We could easily be tainted by this. We could easily be reluctant to help. We could easily be frustrated out of the process. Burnout happens all the time. Unconditional positive regard means that we can work with people who are in a situation, in a crisis, have been doing this for 3 years in recovery and relapse, and still walk up and go, you're just as amazing as you were yesterday. What are we going to do about this? And not get personally mad at them for wanting to do the next right step. So that word by itself, unconditional positive regard, has completely changed 24 years in this business for me. I don't have burnout. I don't have things that I see other colleagues have, because I can personally remove myself from any participation I have in their issues that day. And it makes the relationship so much different, because you can walk in open-minded and go, these are your choices and these are the consequences if you make those choices. I'd prefer, let's go right instead of left.
But the disease is what they have, it's not who they are.
Exactly. So you brought it up about what do you do after the Narcan shot happens? There's a lot of case management, a lot of reentry process. And in this county, some of the things that between the local management board and the WCTR Center and the county government and local law enforcement support are ways to improve the warden's ability to provide reentry services. He just started a pretrial service. All those things are going to greatly impact those who are impacted by incarceration, who then get out and need to go get help. Because right now you can often see that they walk out of the jail and it's go to the treatment program by yourself. We're trying to connect the dots so there is no gap and you walk out alone and you have to walk in alone.
And that's where we come in.
Yeah, and that's where you guys come in. So I'm going to hand it off to them. With that.
Any other questions?
I have a comment. I'm Andrew Ponce from the AF WCTR Center, and when the term opiate epidemic gained momentum, it showed an unprecedented idea about addressing this problem. We have a monthly meeting at Kent County. It includes prevention, it includes outpatient, private providers, the criminal justice system, Shore Regional Health, all these disparate agencies that hardly ever communicated are now working together. We have more presentations in the school for the most susceptible kids. We have counseling in the schools that we didn't have before. The Narcan thing, we've gotten that up and running, and that saves lives. We've expedited admission to the WCTR Center, extending detox and stabilization to a bunch of people. Part of our discharge planning includes where you're going to go. You're going to go to a transitional house. That's a good idea. You're also going to go to outpatient treatment. The 12-step community in Kent County is really powerful. All of us are on a reactionary basis. We were addressing the influx of prescription drugs, and then it was heroin, and now the Colombian cartels are cutting most of their heroin, which is like over 50% of the heroin imported comes from Mexico. They have their own labs in Mexico to process, to create fentanyl and mix it with the heroin before it gets shipped out. And we are reacting to that and responding to that. It's easier now to get into treatment. It's easier to have a follow-through, affordable, quality care at the WCTR Center, and affordable outpatient care and continuing care once you leave. We check all of our transitional houses to make sure that they're operating at a high standard, and we encourage everyone to stay into treatment, and it's working. That's it.
The subject is really, we've covered a lot today. But one thing I wanted to mention earlier is Tim said, people don't really have too many casual conversations about addiction. And in 2004, I started my journey of sobriety. and I was never anonymous. And so I was one of those people that had a lot of casual conversations about alcoholism and addiction, you know, in the grocery store, and when I would just, you know, meet someone, and it was interesting what I learned, and a lot of what I learned is what, you know, we're discussing today, and that was that when we can break down the stigma that goes along with being a recovering alcoholic or addict, even, you know, someone who is actively using, when we can break that down and look at the individual, we can make a huge difference. And what I found personally was that by doing that, I started getting phone calls from friends who either they needed help or they were a family member who didn't have any support and didn't know what to do and didn't know where to go. And I realized, and I've lived on the Eastern Shore my whole life, and I realized that through these conversations, by the grace of just, I was a preschool mom when I went away to rehab. And it didn't take long for the other preschool moms to figure out, you know, where I went for 28 days, which is why I was really never anonymous. And I'm so grateful for that. Because what then I realized is that as I started looking around the shore and trying to find different treatment options, whether it was for the family members or someone who was actively using or drinking, is that there was a lack of connectivity and there what seemed to be a lack of resources. And so over time, I was able to start finding out what resources were out and meeting these folks. And you know, I'm from Queen Anne's County. I was in Talbot for a while. I was in Queen Anne, sort of. So I went around these areas, Dorchester, Caroline, and now that's, you know, I got sober in 2004 and started sort of moving around and seeing what was out there just about 6 years ago, and I realized, oh, and then and the heroin epidemic, as they called it, there was a bigger light shone on it. I remember very specifically, it was the Easton police found out that fentanyl had come into Talbot County, and it was one of the first times that really had been passed around. And the police didn't know what to do. They said, we want to go down to the corner where we know our active users are, and we want to warn them that they shouldn't take this. But if we tell them that there's fentanyl in it, they might want it more and they might seek out where it is. And so through that very brief conversation, I realized that this was something that was so big that I didn't even understand it. I knew what it was like to be an alcoholic. I knew what it was like to be a social drug user. I never used heroin because no one ever offered it to me, to be frank. I probably would have if, you know, it been offered. I did that with methamphetamine one time. I understand the pull and what addiction and alcoholism can do. Then I realized what this really was. And I looked around and I realized that there were a lot of other people like me who tried to help other people and didn't know where to go and what was out there. And through that process, I started to meet people like Val, you know. We met, all of us, in all these different places around the Eastern Shore, and realized that there is a passion out there for all of us to try to help each other, right? And that there really are a lot of resources out there. We have to talk about them. Those of us who are in recovery who choose that we don't want to be anonymous anymore, that's okay. Let's stand up and let's shout that, you know. We have these two wonderful recovery houses here. Easton's growing more, Queen Anne's is getting more. We need to keep these conversations going. We need to find each other. We need to suit up and, you know, suit up and show up. And we need to hold hands and we need to have these conversations. I wish I could give you numbers, you know, because there's a lot of people, as you know, who will just stop and go into a 12-step program and we don't know. I wish we could, right? Because I think there are 23 million recovering people in the United States right now, right? That's a big number. And recovery is possible, and the face of recovery is amazing. You know, it's everybody. Wish we had a lot more answers than we do for you all. The one thing that I do like to discuss when we're all sitting in a room together is keep helping, keep talking, come to these events. Thank goodness you guys are all here. when you go home and you leave here, talk to your neighbors, talk to your spouses about what you learned today. Find out, if they ask a question and you don't know the answer because you didn't get that today, then take one of the cards that you got today and call that person and find out more. The more we can have our sessions with someone and we can teach Narcan, the more we can open up those conversations. I go into the 7-Eleven and offer to go in there and train them. And the conversations just standing around the counter there are really beautiful. But we have to do that, and get these in our schools and talk about prevention and get the message out to teachers and coaches so that we can start and recognize signs in our youth that maybe we can stop it before it starts. Because if we don't start trying to stop it before it starts now, we're just going to have to keep buying more Narcan, right? So anyways, that's a lot of sort of random things that I wanted to say today, but when you said people don't talk about a lot, and I do, yeah. Whether people like, yeah. But you know what? I've met a lot of really great people standing in the middle of the produce section of the grocery store who happen to be in recovery or want some help, and so I encourage that if you can, because it's going to take every single one of us. And people say to me a lot, well, the problem is this, and what would fix it would be this. And while those intentions are good, there's a picture on my wall of Medusa. And to me, that's what this epidemic looks like. It's a head of snakes, and there is a different knife to remove every single snake on that head. And you're a knife, and you're a knife, and so are you, and so are you. And so if we can keep having conversations like this, thank you very much, then we can do it together. But it's gonna take a lot. Thank you for letting me share.
Stated.
Question?
I mean, I had heard, when Dr. Drew was on, he was talking about how 90% of prescriptions of opioids are prescribed in the United States. And that kind of scared me, because I was thinking, are we really in that much pain? Like, what kind of, every time I go to the doctor, they give me a prescription for something, and I don't take it because I'm thinking, if I don't feel the pain, how do I know if I'm healing? So that was one of the things that, because I also can have an addictive personality, and it's one of those things that was like, no, I think I need to feel the pain I'm feeling, because if I don't, how do I know I'm recovering? And if I don't feel the pain, can I re-injure myself? And that was one of the scariest things I'd ever heard about the prescriptions to the opioids, and us being prescribed 90% of them worldwide.
Well, think to yourself, how many here have been to a hospital? And when did pain become the fifth vital sign? Am I right? You're a nurse?
Yeah,
it's a fifth vital sign, and correct? And who drives that in the hospital are the accreditation. JACO has driven that for the most part, because you're dinged, unless the patient's happy. And what makes the patient happy? Where's your pain on this scale? And it's based off of those faces. And so the nurses were running around giving shots, and so what did they end up giving the patient after a while? It was your own pump.
Pain gets a bad rap.
It's
the body's communication.
Right.
There's something wrong.
Something's wrong, but it shouldn't be a vital sign. It's not a vital sign, right? So it's not a vital sign. It's just that your body's reacting post-surgery. But at the same token, that's how far we've come. Pharmaceuticals have gotten in the way. So you're not supposed to go to the dentist and say, okay, I just had a tooth removed, or I have a toothache, and it's not supposed to give you a bottle that big and that thick full of medication. That's the way it is. And the unfortunate part about it is that we have become a society where we treat symptoms rather than the core.
And in the past 10 years, what has changed in my view professionally is the implication of not letting people just feel what they feel because of the circumstances. So whether we're talking about opiates for pain or Xanax for grief, I was astounded at the rate at which my caseload was being given medication to handle normal life circumstances in order to not feel it. To get through a funeral, they were giving them prescription medication to calm down their nerves. And I understand the anxieties and things that go along with that. They change for different people. But it was almost a 100% prescription rate of every client I had who would walk into a doctor's office and say, I can't manage this. The next 3 days are going to be miserable for me. I've lost my mom. And they would write them a prescription for something.
Right.
Prozac, Xanax, you name it. The other is that I worked with a group of seniors in Queen Anne's County in the past 2 years, and it was them doing a project for their senior capstone on the impact of drug use among their peers. And they had a very candid conversation with me that between 9th and 12th grade, they all knew exactly what to tell their doctors their symptoms were to get the drugs that they wanted. And that was from a prescription narcotic to an anxiety medication to stuff for ADHD. They could walk in and just say, I have these 5 symptoms, and the doctor would automatically prescribe it for them. And their classmates have been doing it for years. So it's not even the opioid piece, it's that they have masked and mastered the behavior to walk into a physician and get what they need between the ages of 10 and 18. Social media.
I grew up in the 70s and 80s, and, I mean, we just dealt with it. But when did it all change where people didn't want to deal with it? Like, I don't, this has boggled my mind.
To live without air conditioning, and now, oh my gosh, if you got into your car without air conditioning, it's what you're used to. And kids today are smart. One of the things that I was going to say, and I come to a lot of these, I am not in Kent County, I work in Talbot County, but I wanted to see what you guys have. And one of the things that I find really disconcerting is that in all of our topics, we're dealing with people who've already dealt with the addiction, and really we need to start early with our middle schoolers in giving them the coping skills so that they don't go to drugs. We need to understand, that teach our 14-year-olds that bowling actually can be fun, and we have to make it fun for them. Giving them, one of the things that I know is of anybody that I've ever talked to, and there's always exceptions to every rule, but anyone who's developed an addiction probably has addiction in their family and started using drugs of some level or another in their teens. I mean, that to me has gone hand in hand. Plus, you're dealing with kids who've experienced a trauma, divorce, bullying, any kind of trauma, all of these things. And unfortunately, there's no money there in prevention because there's no, you can't say, well, it's because of this kid got this education or this programming or this mentor that they didn't do it. But you can see that someone who's had an addiction and gets better, you can see the change. But prevention has to start with our adolescents, and we're not doing enough there at all. Educating them, the adolescent brain right now focuses on risk versus reward. So if they say, oh, well, I know that my Aunt Rachel was an alcoholic and she's fine now, so I'm going to give it a try because I know I can be okay. And the heartbreaking stories that I hear over and over of people who've gone through things, lost somebody, overcome it. I haven't experienced that. My hope in the world is what you said, no overdoses, no deaths, but that's because nobody starts the drugs or gets to the addiction level, and we're not addressing that, and that is what I would like to see in the future.
We talked about this a little bit earlier, and it goes back to what you were saying too, and what Jen was saying is that because there was the medication was easy to give, so you and I maybe around the same age. I grew up in the 70s and 80s too. And we just dealt with things, right? And we had some issues in our house. We all just dealt with it, and maybe we told some of our friends. And then we became this generation as we got older that all of a sudden you could get that instant feel better pill. So when our kids were anxious, or when some people's kids were anxious, they would go, oh, well, we'll get you a feel better pill. We don't have to go through therapy. We don't have to teach coping skills. We don't have to go out of our way. We're so busy anyway. Just take this, right? So it's just another generation without coping skills. Well, I was 35 years old in rehab, and they said, you don't have any coping skills. Really? Okay, what do I do now? But I agree with you completely that if we talk to our children at a young age, we told our boys were 3 and 4 when I went away. My husband and I are both in recovery. They grew up in a recovering household. We explained to them what it was, what it is. We celebrate recovery in our homes. In our home, We've told them about our family tree and some of the mental health issues in our family tree. We've tried to give them as much science as we can. A group that comes into our children's high school talks about science. It talks about how a brain develops and what happens when you put drugs in it, and we give them the science and the facts so that the children, when it's time to make a good decision, have real information. You know, someone told me when I was, 11 and 10, you do drugs, it's bad and it's scary. And the first time I got high, it wasn't bad or scary. Okay? It kind of felt good, and I laughed a little bit, and I thought, well, this isn't so bad. Why should I believe them? So the next time it was offered, sure. The next time something else was offered, sure. And I was 12. And it took me until I was 34 years old to finally stop. I had, there was nature and nurture on both sides. So we have tried to discuss with our children, nature and nurture, they're 16, 18, knock on wood so far. So those are things that are really important, and that goes back to the conversations, keeping those conversations going and being a little bit open. And there are a lot of people who don't want to talk to their children about things, or they don't know how. And there are a lot of resources out there too that we offer it. A lot of it's on social media, a lot of it's through prevention, but we offer it, and there's lots out there.
Well, I would say one thing that's very different is I'm not that old, but when I was a kid, every phone was actually attached to a wall, and there was no such thing as the internet. So I can sit here right now and order prescription pills while I'm talking to you, and as a father of an 8th grader and a 10th grader, it's really, really kind of scary. So I just think the access is 1,000 times easier for these kids today, really for anybody. And as a parent and a teacher and an elected official, you have to be 10 times more vigilant and more communicative, because back in the day, if I wanted to get pot, I actually had to talk to somebody in person, and it probably was somebody that wasn't in my peer group, and that was going to be really awkward. But this kind of eliminates all of that. You can order your drugs without even being in the same room as the person that's sending them to you. So to me, this is a big part of the problem, honestly.
Well, I agree that keeping the conversation open with your kids is really, really key. And I also can say that our public schools are doing their best to help. They are starting education at about the age 9 level. And I know Annette works with them, who's sitting over here, to help bring education and information to those kids at school. But it can't just happen once. It needs to be an ongoing thing. And they're trying to keep that conversation going in the schools from age 9 through the high school level. But it's also hard to keep them engaged. They go to the information, they're like, okay, I've heard this before, but you can't give up. You've got to keep trying. And if we can have...
Who has ever tried a drug was probably told beforehand, drugs are bad. So it's more than education. The community engagement is huge. One of the things, as the adolescent brain is changing, the dopamine levels change, we need to give them opportunities for more exercise. We need to give them more opportunities for healthy risk-taking. Public speaking is risk-taking. Any of those things to help them engage. Because education, because like Rachel said, for every piece of information that you get, oh, this is what's going to happen to you. But look, Grandpa's been smoking for 60 years and he's still alive and walking around. They'll find an excuse. It's the community engagement. One of the things that I've also noticed in anybody that I've ever talked to that's either stayed away from drugs completely or had gotten into recovery, there was someone outside of their family that was the catalyst to help them, with somebody who cared about them that didn't have to care about them. That's where I think that more and more community engagement for our children to know that one, also if you're a parent, and this is one of the things that I think's happened a little bit, is that you're terrified to say anything because then, you could be sued because you told your kid. I mean, like, let's say Rachel's boys have kids come over and she says something and then those parents get mad at her or whatever. We need to be able to, I don't know, we just need to do more, but education is not just it for the kids. It's one component, but our kids need more than that. And I think that that is what's going to help any addiction, because another theory that I have is opioid is our problem right now, but one of the things that I know, cocaine is becoming, so if it's not one drug, it's going to be another, so we need to nip this before there's even an interest in a drug at all.
The relationship with people not doing things, natural processes, is you find that you give people an opportunity to experience those things. If you want to teach patients, you don't actually teach patients. You give them reasons to be patient. If you want to teach them coping skills, you have to put them in situations to actually have to make the choices to cope with the thing. And the education is just showing an example on the board of actually having them go through a confidence building experience. The more we do that, the more likely they are to make better choices on a daily basis, rather than never having to go through how it feels to get your heart broken again while you're in recovery. What it feels like to say no to someone you care about deeply but is not in recovery. What it feels like to go to work and be told what to do by a boss you can't stand and not lose your job because you punched them. And there are all sorts of things that we go through with the clients or have in the past that put them in positions to make those choices. They've even turned into a lot of the community programs have turned to pre-employment opportunities because these are folks who are inexperienced at maintaining a job for a long period of time because of their recovery. It's a chronically relapsing disease. They are constantly job hopping based on their behavior when they're trying to stay clean. And the pre-employment actually gives them opportunities with employers who have an expectation of their behavior. And it gives them chances to work for months in those systems in order to maintain the kind of job that will get them into the local places that won't hire them right now. So there's a wall there, and I have a little bit to talk about later, but there's pre-employment, pre-work, pre-recovery, not just clean, that people can get into that work off that, not just education, but an actual experience to give them the confidence to go through a sobriety house and walk out the other side and say thank you and stay clean for 10 or 15 years, 20 years after that. Since they have linked the recovery community or the recovery process with the mental health process, more instances than not, usually when people start showing signs of emotions or not being able to deal with those emotions, they're immediately medicated. So that kind of defeats the purpose. And then the drug replacement therapy, which prolongs and doesn't teach us, like you said, we need to be able to teach how to deal with the emotions. We are such a fast-paced society. We want it fixed right now. And if a pill will fix that thing, we can move on to the next thing. And that seems to have been what's happened in the past 5 or 10 years.
I want to say a word as a behavioral health provider around the issue of children as well. You want 20% of kids, 20% of adults that have some diagnosis of mental health disorder. That's 1 out of 5 of our children, whether it's ADHD or somewhere along the continuum of severity. We know for sure that people with mental health concerns, children, adolescents, and adults, have greater vulnerability or at higher risk for substance use. So the field in general now doesn't talk about mental health and addiction, it talks about behavioral health, because we see the relationship between these. Just to give maybe some more hope to the discussion, we talked about sort of all the stages, Narcan, jail, etc. Outpatient and Whitsett Center, of course, but outpatient treatment and what that looks like here in Kent County and throughout the shore. As was mentioned, there's 3 providers in our community just recently. I mean, what is it, a year ago, Tim, we had Kent Behavioral, and that was it. Mm-hmm. So I think the provider community is wanting to be responsive and come in and open up offices in Kent County. I work for Eastern Shore Psychological Services. We have 4 sites around the whole shore. But we're right down on High Street above the Dunkin' Donuts. There's a couple of pieces of good news. One is substance abuse treatment is covered by medical assistant insurance and most private insurances as well. The other good news is that most providers around here aren't going to turn anybody away. It shows up in the door regardless of their ability to pay. So access, High Street, is here in this community. You get a sense of what this looks like. People come in, they're getting a full assessment so we can determine the level of care that is right for them. Do they need to go into a rehab? Is it okay for them to come in, do they test out at an intensive outpatient level, which is 3 hours, 3 times a week, 9, really 9, 10 hours of treatment a week. So somebody coming out of WITSIC can come right into an IOP and have 10 hours a week, not to necessarily be prescribed medicine, and that's actually seldom done with people in recovery unless you have really talented psychiatrists that understand medically assisted treatment. But to talk, to have a relapse prevention program, to look for making improvements in their health, in their home, jobs, and their sense of purpose. Right? So this is longer term. If they step down from that, they might come to an outpatient group a couple times a week, plus work with a mental health counselor once a week on top of that. So there's a gradual, as a person gains time in their recovery and they participate in their own recovery, they don't need as much treatment as long as the other things that Janet's mentioning are in place. So I think the reason the epidemic is so important to people is because we all recognize it's the entire fabric of our community that needs to support recovery. You know, employment being just one thing, housing being another. And as has been mentioned, there's a lot of great work happening right now in this county. I want to make just one more comment about, what the science is telling us and why it does take some time. We now understand the brain a lot better. And we now know that the receptors in the brain that are activated by opiates don't just appear overnight. So it's, white knuckling it or toughing it out in those first 3 months. It takes 18 months to 2.5 years for your brain to really grow back to where it was before there was pre-use. And so, that message, I think we need to talk to people who are in recovery. This is the hall that you're in for. We need to all understand that as well, and we need to constantly reinforce the disease model. As we talked about stigma, this is all about people appreciating this is a disease like any other. And if we don't really emphasize that, we're never going to get out from under this. It has to be treated. It has to be funded like a disease. And there's good news. Maryland in particular has started recognizing it. We're still looking for parity on the legislative level with the disease model. So there's a lot of hope here. There's an awful lot of work. Like recovery, it really is one day at a time. We can't really even afford to look out over a horizon when we've got 6 people dying, OD every week in this county. So thanks for those remarks. But you have your help.
Go ahead.
Yeah, what I'd like to talk about is, I think it's good. I love the conversation. I see a lot of things that are happening scientifically, and it's good to see a lot of different avenues and how everyone's like a team and some sort of things. But I'd like to talk about something that's never been mentioned yet, and that's the spiritual aspect. I think as human beings, and to recognize your Creator God, who doesn't want anyone controlled by anything that's dark and evil, and that's what's happening here in addiction. You're actually giving away your freedom of life, and you're placing it under the opioids and the drugs and all that. And so there's a spiritual aspect. I think I just don't think people are realizing that. I think God's plan for the human being is to have a life that's free and a life that's full. And that's God's plan for people. And I think when people get a hold of, let's say, Christ and plant that into their mind that there's something bigger than them, and that the hope that God has for them and the life and the plan that God has for an individual, and if they get a hold of that, it's going to be the greater power than the opioids and the things that could control them. And I think that's a very important part of recovery. I think, and being, every one of us here is a spirit being. And oftentimes we can settle for the natural, for the Narcan, or that'll get you out of it, that might save your life and such. But I think if we settle for that, I think you're coming up short. I think what God wants for you as an individual is to have a life that's full and rich and not be controlled by these things. And the way to do that is through faith, and to know that God has, you are not you didn't come from slime under a rock. You didn't come from, a monkey. You're not let's get out of the animal plane and realize that you are a special individual, that no one in this world is like you. And that's God's plan. And I look here and I see so many beautiful people and so many beautiful answers, and their hearts want to help, and we wouldn't be here if it wasn't for that. But the spiritual aspect, I think I haven't heard one person say that through Christ, through God, that you can get out of this and have a life that's full. So I'm saying that. Thank you.
Jane?
Thanks. I'd like to ask the panel about the relationship between the pharmaceutical industry and the street drug dealer. It seemed there was some implication that they moved heroin, they tested markets, they moved heroin in, and then we talk about drugs being imported from Colombia, Mexico, other countries. But recently there have been some articles saying that many of the prescription drugs, they're not coming from Mexico, they're not coming from Colombia, they're coming from the pharmaceutical, that they're going into the hands of the street drug dealers. And I wonder what you knew or thought about this. Is this true, or what's the situation? What's the relationship?
I didn't read that article, so I can't speak to that article per se, but I do know that, the drug trade itself, widely known, that heroin obviously is not grown necessarily in the United States. Mexico has become a pretty vibrant area now to grow heroin. And so when we're looking at the fact of the importing of illicit drugs, we're looking at the United States being really saturated with that. China has been very, very active in the manufacturing also of fentanyl. In fact, fentanyl can be made right here in the United States. All they need is a good old office space and a little lab, and they can manufacture fentanyl right here. But initially, let me say this: when fentanyl was being passed through the United States, initially fentanyl was manufactured and passed along on the East Coast in pill form. On the West Coast, it was being manufactured in pill form. But then, we've gotten it so at the point that it's so cheap that they're able to take a kilo of heroin, which is relatively expensive, whereas a kilo of fentanyl is cheap, and they're able to cut the heroin in such a way that they're able to spread the product so thinly that they're able to make more money. So a kilo of heroin goes a lot further with the way that they're able to cut the heroin. So when you're talking about prescription pills, it's a lot easier, I suppose, when you've got somebody on the black market. And when we're talking the black market, the dark web, if you're able to get on that and you're able to get a hold of prescription medications illegally, you can probably go ahead from that standpoint as a drug dealer and distribute as much as you want. The dark web, there is a bad place. A lot of bad things happen on the dark web, and if you can get anything you want and do anything you want on that, and I'm sure that if you can do that, you can get illegal prescription medications on that as well. Yes, sir.
Couple of questions. First of all, the governor has declared the opioid addiction to be high on the priority level. Have you seen at the local level any evidence of that in terms of funding, in terms of cooperation?
Yes, we have.
Lots.
Good. And the other thing that I'm a little curious over, the gentleman in the back mentioned the spiritual component. I don't see anyone from the faith community being represented on the panel. Is there? Pardon?
Oh.
No.
On the panel.
They're not on the panel, but we're in here.
All right. But my question is, in the past, because I'm familiar with spirit-based or spiritually-based rehab programs, there seems to be a little bit of a territorial concern, where maybe more government-driven rehab procedures are kind of not open to the spiritual component, and therefore, there kind of a little bit of disintermediation, I guess would be the term for it. Isn't it time to get together with all facets of this?
That's a great point that you make there. I think that historically rehabs have been centered more around the 12-step process. And let me say this, what most people don't realize is the 12 steps were originally written from Scripture. People don't know that.
So is our Constitution.
Right. But with that being said, they were reframed in a way to be able to make sure that everybody fits under the umbrella. And as a person of faith, I will say that I understand the gentleman's comments in the back, but in this position, I can't speak to that. But I understand that there are many ways for people to find their spiritual path in recovery. There's no wrong way for somebody to find their path in this recovery. I don't care how you get there, just get there, because I know that in recovery, when people find their path in recovery, they will find a joy. The 12 steps says, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. It says came. That is a process. So as they move through the recovery process, there is a healing, there is a hope. And as the 12th step says, when we get where we're going, we want to share this hope. We want to share this dream with others, and we pass along the good news, the gospel of recovery. I can't help but tell somebody else where I've been. So there's healing, there's hope, there's joy, there's prosperity in recovery. So that's why we're here, because we want people to know that you don't have to stay where you've been, because there's hope on the other side of this thing. So.
Yes.
Bryce?
And one thing, when Randy and I are sort of, bridging the gaps between, from rehab out into life, or, from gift, one thing that we can do for people is offer them, all the different options, faith-based, 12-step, there's Celebrate Recovery. So it's not that we know what's out there and we offer it. And the churches are part of our community, and a lot of them come to us, and they want us to go in and again start those conversations. And it doesn't have to be formal process. We have a lot of churches around here too that are very, very recovery friendly and really embrace the recovery community. Hope Fellowship here in Chestertown in particular, we just had a Night of Hope. Christ Church in Easton for sure, they have the Nights of Hope, and so it is a very big part of the fabric of that, what is happening over here on the Eastern Shore. And so we're always looking for more people, wink, wink, who would like to get involved.
Absolutely.
And in the past decade, I can speak to Maryland, but in the surrounding states, the ability for the criminal justice system and the judicial system to understand that faith-based opportunities hold just as much clout as any scientific process have increased drastically. They're now using those things in sentencing. There's case law about them that prohibit you from doing one or the other, and it's had a pretty deep impact on the system that otherwise wasn't listening to the faith community for a long time.
Has that helped when the state translated into dollars yet?
We've actually been, I think, fairly lucky with the dollars.
Yes.
Governor's declaration of the state of emergency, which happened last March, as all of the counties in the state did, we received money to put towards the heroin and opioid epidemic locally. And Andrew spoke about a group of us that get together once a month, the local drug and alcohol coalition, and that's an open meeting if anybody ever would like to join us. We did an analysis of what we have in this county and where the gaps are, and put our focus to try and fill those gaps. And one of the focuses was treating not just the addict, but the addict's family. And we were able to get funding to bring Rachel and Rainey in to the process. So that was a really big help and what we used our money for. We also used it to expedite the process and put more beds in the Whitsett Center so that we could treat more people more rapidly. And if anybody wants to throw anything in there, we have our trailer, yeah. We have our trailer that we're going to use to go out and educate anybody who wants to come in and see the trailer. It's an asset that is owned by the county, and it replicates a bedroom of a teen or early 20-something, and how they hide their addiction right in plain sight. It's an asset that we really don't want folks under 18 coming in. We want these people to be parents or adults or community members, coaches, Girl Scout leaders, whatever, to come in and learn some of the tricks of the trade so that they can be aware and maybe notice a growing addiction before it gets too terribly bad, so that we can all work together again as a community to help fight this. It takes a community effort to do it.
I just want to say thank you for the opportunity to be a part of your forum today. Very briefly, you have identified a plethora of problems and issues. I want to leave just a small glimmer of hope, and that is that within this room, in the midst of a number of issues that you've identified, right in our midst are the answers to many of our problems that we're facing. You know, it's a lot better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. I would dare challenge every one of you in here, if you would purpose to aim to be a neighbor to someone around you, you can help make this place a better world. It starts with you and I. And all you've got to do is just make a contribution, and you'll help solve some of the issues that we're faced with today.
Andy?
Yes, the trailer, who would one call to access the trailer?
You can call me, or you can call the sheriff's office, and it is available, as long as we can get staff to come out and go to your event. Our goal is to get it out there.
And the meetings, the monthly meetings, where are those held?
Held in the Commissioner's Hearing Room at 400 High, 7:30 a.m. on the first Wednesday of each month. We go from 7:30 to 8:30, sometimes 9 o'clock, and we hold them at that hour because all of us have jobs that we need to get to and be productive at. So we try and meet early in the day so everyone can go back and go to their jobs.
Price says something that's very important, and something that you said sparked something in my mind. The dark web. It seems like one of the things about addiction in our wired up world, and Chris said this earlier as well, it's too easy. And we have become a society of people that we are too focused on what we do every day. We live our lives, and we think it's not our place to mind our neighbor's business. But it is your place. Because I can remember when I was a kid, I couldn't do anything in my parents' house that they didn't know about. I swore my mother had eyes in the back of her head because there were neighbors all around us who cared, who got involved, who made my business their business, and therefore it was my mother's business, and I hated that. And I loved it because that meant they cared about me. They worried about me. So we need to stop worrying about getting in trouble for minding other people's business. And when we see something that isn't right, like the old saying, you see something, say something. If your neighbor's kid seems like there's just something about them that isn't the way they used to be, say something. If there are people around your neighbor's house that didn't used to be there, that only come at night and leave before morning, or are only there for 15 or 20 minutes while they meet out in the yard or out in the driveway, and then they leave, say something. It's our community. We have every right when something happens that isn't just quite normal to say something. Because if you say something, you're saving a life. You're making a difference in your community. You're taking ownership of your community. And I think it's very important. Pastor Blatt?
I think it's a good idea what you're saying, Ms. Leslie. I'm reminded of, if you flash it back, I remember the officer who said that I can order drugs on my cell phone and how easy it is. But when I see the resources here, I see a lot of different departments. And it's not so easy to find the answers to all these. I mean, we have a forum here where everyone's all together. Why can't we have a website that's just as easy to access every one of you in one place, and just make it just as easy to get help as there is to order drugs?
In some cases, we are as a result of the governor's actions to give us funding to do things in the state to help with this scenario, there's an organization that works for the Midshore, and they have started a number of really interesting
projects that aren't advertised as well as they should be. One of which is vital to us now, is a text process, because no one wants to tell anybody anything. They want to text them things, which is fine. So even if you won't tell somebody something, text them that rude message about their child who left at 3 in the morning. The text messaging process is a small survey that anyone who gets the number off the helpline can text in, and it sends you through a series of questions and resources and puts you in contact with them almost immediately. Like someone will pick up the phone from a crisis line and call you back if you've used that text line. The website that they're establishing is also there to put all of the resources on the Midshore on that spot. But in retrospect, it's also something we have to advertise and tell enough people about and get them to share that information with them, so. But that'll be a Midshore resource that's in the process now. The texting piece is already operational, but a website, short of your own county website, is being established.
There's also a state website called Before It's Too Late, and there are some brochures of this over there. It's a statewide website put together by the state level of the opioid intervention team. And there are sections on there for each county, and you can click on your county and get resources. And we often cross county lines. So it's one place where you can get information on all the counties. So if you live in one county, work in another, you can find resources in both. So we do contribute to that, and it's called Before It's Too Late.
I think we've brought a lot of important information together today. I can't thank you enough again. I thanked you in the beginning, and I thank you now for caring enough to come and to join the discussion. I think the important thing that we all take away is this is a conversation that needed to happen in one room with all of these people together, voicing their thoughts and their feelings about this epidemic. And I think the only way that you can stop it is to talk about it. And I hope that you learned important tools, you learned where to get information, you maybe got a better understanding of addiction, how it affects people, who it affects, people on the front lines who deal with it every day and see the best and the worst of it. There is recovery, there is hope, there is a future, and there is life after. But the important part is that we all have to work together to make that happen. We have to take this conversation we had in this room, we have to go out that door, we have to go home, we have to have that conversation again with the people that weren't here, in your house, in your neighborhood, at work, at your social club, at the gym, anywhere. Take Rachel's model. Start a conversation in the produce section, because it's something we need to talk about, because it is an epidemic and it is a problem, and the only way that we're going to stop it is to call it out, acknowledge it for what it is, and let it know that it's not welcome here, and that we're going to keep talking until we can do our best to make it go as far away as possible. So I thank the panel for your candor and for everything that you've done on the front lines of this epidemic, and that you keep doing that. And thank you all again.